Hey guys, I had a video coming out today on the Ruger PC9, but I got a private message from a viewer and she was asking me about what caliber to choose for concealed carry. Her dilemma was that she's about 5'11", about 100 pounds, and 9mm proved a little too much recoil for her. She qualified for a CWP with a 22, but she's asking for a caliber to kind of cut the difference between the two. Personally, I would never recommend anything smaller than a 9mm, but if you absolutely had to run something smaller, a 380 with modern defensive ammunition is pretty much as low as you want to go and still have the efficacy of a full powered cartridge basically. And it got me into a bit of a long-winded explanation on how I believe that her not being able to handle the recoil wasn't because she was incapable of doing so, but rather it was symptomatic of probably a poor weapon choice. So let me explain some things to you guys. I have 4 contributing factors outside of, yourself, your training, your strength, everything else, 4 contributing factors to felt recoil and how you can use these guidelines to pick the softest shooting, most effective concealed carry weapon. So the first one being caliber. So how much your given caliber of choice affects you. So how much energy it generates, which translates into how great of a recoil impulse the shooter feels. So while on the small end of things, like 22 has the least amount of felt recoil, something like 50 AE has the most amount of felt recoil. It's a tremendous cartridge. So here's what I'm going to show off. Now it's understandable that she was considering a 22, right? Because 22 has very little felt recoil. These are 20 grain supersonic projectiles out of a GSG 1911 with an innovative RM sound suppressor provided by Silencer Shop, and you can see just how little recoil it produces. And the gun hardly moved at all. Now the problem with 22, of course, is it lacks the terminal ballistics of a dedicated man-stopping round. And I hate using that word man-stopper because it has a lot of negative connotations. Back when guys would say, well, if you don't have a caliber that's 45 or greater, you might as well be throwing spitballs. Now, it's understandable that folks would have their reservations about running 9mm ball as a defensive round because it tends to just over-penetrate without dumping much of its energy into whatever it hits. So the terminal ballistics of 9mm ball, and really most ball ammunition, are pretty terrible. 45 ACP is decent because it's slower moving and a larger projectile. So just to reiterate, the smallest caliber I would ever recommend for concealed carry is 9mm. If you can't handle 9mm, and I'm sure you can, but if you're certain you cannot, maybe you have arthritis, maybe you're disabled, 380. 22 is not great, and don't give me the spiel about bouncing around inside of somebody's head because you're an assassin. That's hogwash. 22 is better than a brick and it's better than a bat. That would be the standard at which I would put 22 at. But I digress. The other contributing factor, number 2, is action type. So most people would agree that 38 Special, not a hard-hitting round, right? Not uncontrollable. It's not 44 Magnum. It's nothing tremendous. Not 10mm. It's 38 Special. Well, action type. So this is a J-frame 38 snub. Now, in this particular firearm, there is no semi-automatic action, obviously. The only thing going on, it's a double action only Smith & Wesson 442, is that I pull the trigger and an internal hammer cocks back, falls, detonates the round touches off, and I feel the recoil impulse, meaning I am the recoil spring. So take a look. Now that's pretty tremendous, right? Now it's partially because of the action. There's nothing to absorb that recoil, but it's equally as much the weight, the mass of the firearm that's firing it. But we'll get back to that. That's gonna be number 3. So for number 2, action type. In particular, I tell people, A, go with a semi-automatic, and B, go with a locked breech design. Let me show you why. 9mm Makarov, or 9x18, is considered to be, at least in terms of generated energy, less than a 9x19 or 9mm Parabellum. This is a Bulgarian Makarov. It is direct blowback and chambered in 9x18. Watch how much recoil this little gun has. Now, it didn't seem too bad, right? But both modern militaries and ballisticians, if you will, consider 9x18 to be subpar compared to 9x19 in terms of terminal ballistics and terminal efficacy, right? Here's what's interesting. So this is a Glock 19. It's firing a round that has more recoil, more power generated from it, but it's in a locked breech semi-automatic design. Watch the difference in recoil. So despite the fact that it's firing a heavier round traveling at a higher velocity, meaning more energy, the felt recoil from a Glock 19, or 19X in this case, is substantially less than the heavier, lighter caliber PMM. Partially because of the action. So what's happening in a direct blowback versus a locked breech design is in a direct blowback, nothing locks the action or delays the action until pressure levels are safe inside. Instead, the designers chose to use a heavy recoil spring and a heavy slide. It's why guns like the Walther PPK, the Burst of Thunder, and the High Point seem to have disproportionate amounts of recoil given their caliber. Now, if you're confused on, well, how do I tell, I'm not an expert, how do I tell if it's a direct blowback or if it's a locked breech design? There's an easy way to do this, right? Look at the barrel in this design. When I rack the slide, the barrel does not move at all. It's a fixed barrel design, right? On a locked breech design, like this on a 1911, if you watch carefully, the chamber portion, this little cut in the barrel, drops. That's the unlocking cycle. So, you know, it's a swinging leak Browning design, but that's a locked breech design. So what that does is it's decelerating the slide. It also reduces the stiffness of the recoil spring, and it decreases the weight of the slide. So what do these things all matter? Well, a great deal of felt recoil is how much inertia is generated by the slide and then reciprocated into the shooter's wrist, hand, and arm. So with a direct blowback firearm, it's not delayed at all. And to compensate for the fact that you're getting the full brunt of that caliber's generated energy, you have to have a heavy slide and a heavy recoil spring. A side effect of that is it's very difficult to rack for people with arthritis or people with weaker hands. On a locked breech design, like either that 1911, a Beretta, a Glock, a SIG 938, any myriad of designs, the chamber is locked, the action is locked until the pressure inside that chamber reaches to a safe level, meaning you're not generating as much of that recoil back into the slide and into the shooter's arm. Now that's felt recoil. You're still getting the same amount of recoil impulse if you were to use the same caliber in two guns with different actions, but at least towards the extraction portion of the action cycling, you're gonna get less felt recoil because the spring is lighter and because the slide is so much lighter, you're getting less mass traveling violently back and forth. It's part of the reason why in submachine guns, open bolt, direct blowbacks are considered relatively uncontrollable. There's a large amount of mass traveling very quickly. Now, that's a different story entirely. I mean, locked breech works great for those, but it also can lead to cook-offs, but forget about that for the time being. Now, the third influencing factor, and it's super, super critical, is mass, right? And I'll use that 38 Special again to demonstrate. This is that 442, it's a very lightweight 38 snub, and watch this. Oh, that's 5. All right, so you notice it's a pretty decent amount of recoil. Here's a Smith & Wesson Model 10-6 firing the exact same Hornady defensive ammunition. This is a 158 grain XTP. The exact same load with a full-sized gun, right? Much heavier. Watch the difference in recoil. Night and day. I could do that all day long. You put me through 200 rounds with that J-frame and my hands will be freaking throbbing. This guy, all day long, no problem. Now some of you guys are saying, yeah, but there's also a longer barrel, so more of the powder is actually being burned up in the barrel, and you're not wrong, but weight has a lot to do with it. Here's another example of what I'm talking about. This is the Beretta 92FS with a set of aluminum grips on it, Aluma grips, and look how little recoil this very heavy 9mm has. Very, very, very little. And by comparison, this Glock 19X, which has a shorter barrel, of course, but it's pretty close in terms of overall size, barrel length, and whatnot, but it has a polymer frame, so it weighs a few ounces less. This means there's less mass to actually soak up that recoil impulse, so the shooter's arm is getting more of the brunt of it. And I'll show you. It's a great little gun, by the way. As you can see, there is a definite clear difference in the recoil impulse between a polymer framed and a steel framed automatic. Now, whether that difference is great enough to warrant you carrying a full-sized steel semi-automatic 9mm, probably not, realistically. My rule of thumb for this is carry the biggest, heaviest gun you can realistically carry and conceal. It seems like common sense, right? Now, I know you're thinking, yeah, but you advocate for pocket carry. And I do advocate for pocket carry because the convenience of pocket carry means that you will realistically always have a gun. And having a crappy gun with terrible ballistics is better than having no gun that's otherwise perfect, but you left it at home because you didn't want to carry it. So what's the takeaway from this? Look, most people can handle the recoil of any semi-automatic handgun within reason. 44 Magnum can be a little dicey, but hell, my 100-pound wife can shoot that. It's all about form. If the gun's a little too much recoil for you, do a weaver stance, lock your right elbow. Is it tactical? Not really, but does it work? Absolutely, because no matter how much a gun kicks, it doesn't kick enough to move your entire body weight rearward if you engage muscles and bones together. Also, in terms of capacity, having those larger, heavier guns in general means you're going to have a lot more capacity. That Glock 19X, for example, holds 17, or even with the +2 base plate, you get a tremendous amount of ammunition inside that magazine. That also means the increased weight of having all that ammo in the gun is going to absorb some of that recoil by making the pistol as a whole much heavier. In a nutshell, you should carry what you're most comfortable with and what you can most comfortably and effectively put rounds on target with. I would never ever recommend a 22 unless it's all you can positively handle. But like I said, it beats a brick and it beats your bare fists. And above all else, make sure you practice, practice, practice. If you can effectively get rounds into, the thread hole of a needle at 200 paces with your Jennings 22, well, far be it for me to tell you not to carry it. If you are completely honed yourself in terms of draw speed, in terms of shooting precision, in terms of shooting speed and accuracy, then it doesn't matter what you have, because any gun will do if you're in the right sort of mindset. I'm not going to be a victim, I'm going to do what's necessary. I'm not saying go out on the street looking for a fight, but understand that if push comes to shove, you need to be able to use that weapon to its full potential and potentially take someone's life to preserve your own. Thanks, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Burst reviews.